And as we're all joining, we can have that. But let's get started, because this is why we're here today. We're here to hear amazing wisdom from two iconic leaders. And so I'll just start quickly by introducing myself so you know who I am, because we are here in celebration of Women's Equality Day. I'm Kelli Thompson. I am the author of Closing the Confidence Gap, Boost Your Peace, Your Potential, and Your Paycheck. And I also happen to be the coach of Fable's Leading with Confidence Career Book Club. And we've been reading My Life in Full by Indra Nooyi, my book, and another book by Cy Wakeman. I've coached and trained hundreds of women to trust themselves, lead with more confidence, make an impact at work, and ultimately advance to the rooms where decisions are made. But I want to start by introducing Padmasree Warrior. She is the woman who brought us all here today. Padma is the founder, president, and CEO of Fable. Fable, of course, is the online book club that I've been a part of. Some of you here have been part of. Previously, Padma was the chief executive officer for NIO. NIO is a U.S. manufacturer of smart electric and autonomous vehicles. And prior to NIO, Padma served as the chief technology and strategy officer at Cisco. And I can attest to this. Throughout Padma's career as an exec in the tech industry, Padma has mentored female entrepreneurs, business executives, engineers, and others, including myself, about work and life in a male-dominated field. I would also like to say a special hello to all the Leading with Confidence Club members that are here in the audience today. As you know, you just got done reading My Life in Full by Indra Nooyi. It is an amazing book. And so I want to introduce Indra. For a dozen years as chairperson and as CEO of PepsiCo, Indra, I'll say is one of the world's most admired business leaders. She was the first woman of color and immigrant to lead a Fortune 500 company, and she transformed the company with a long-term vision, vigorous pursuit of excellence, and a deep sense of purpose, which she beautifully highlights in her book. Indra is a revered role model who has long spoken up about women, equality, inclusion, and evolving the global economy to support families. So I'm very excited to have this conversation with both of you. And if it's all right, I would love to kick off with a question for Indra about her book. You know, when I was talking with Padma and she asked me, Kelli, what books do you want women to read? I said, non-negotiable choice, My Life in Full by Indra Nooyi. And I said, the stories in this book are beautiful. And I was sucked in. And so many of the readers said this. And so our question for you, Indra, is you recall so many key moments from your life in such beautiful detail. Like when you started writing this book, like how did you recall all these memories? Did you have journals or pictures or other mementos that you use? Like how did you recall all these in such beautiful detail?
First of all, just great to be on this Women's Equality Day event, Kelli. So thank you for having me. And I know Padma for many, many years. And I have to tell all of the listeners here today, the viewers today, she's one of the original technology heroes in the industry, in the whole tech industry, I'd say. She's a person who's got deep technical expertise. She has a soul. She's just a delightful personality. And so it's a privilege to be on the same show with Padmasree. I've seen her in action up front and close, and I adore this woman. You know, when writing these books are not easy to write because you have to provide enough depth, especially if it's a memoir of your growing up and what happened as the years went by. What I discovered is that my growing up, I could remember even more vividly than I did my later years. Mm-hmm. I started to relive every incident, and I remembered every song we sang and the songs I heard on the plane coming over from India to the United States. It was like it was all evergreen in my head. For my life in PepsiCo, I needed to refer to my digital archive that PepsiCo gifted me when I left. But my early years, there were very few photographs, but the memories were vivid. Mm-hmm. So by just talking about them on tape, I'd say if we had to write a book just on my early years, that could have filled up a volume by itself. Mm-hmm. So this was just joyful memories, difficult in times, joyful memories that are forever etched in my head.
Mm, that's beautiful. I love how you said that even just the song on an airplane can evoke so many memories. Like, and I think you captured that well in your book, is really helping us feel the five senses of everything that you've been in. And so it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Padma, you've always encouraged everyone to find their own micro community of leaders, a close-knit, trusted group of advisors and people with like-minded interests. How did you find your own community of leaders?
Yeah. Thank you, Indra, for being here. It's such a great pleasure. And Kelly, you're one of the best coaches I know. So people are really lucky to be in your club. And I don't say that, I've always been skeptical of coaching and coaches till I met you, and you coached us in my previous company. So I genuinely learned a lot from you. And Indra is someone I've admired for so long. I think she was the first person, like I remember first running into Indra in the elevator when I was at Motorola, and she was on our board, and I had just become a C-level executive, and I was in complete awe, like I was speechless when I saw her, because I learned so much just watching her. For me, I went to school in India at an engineering school called the Indian Institutes of Technology, IIT for short. Very few women were in college studying engineering at the time. There were, I think, 5 women in a class of 250. So I went there from a very small town in southern India. I grew up in a small little town in southern India, and I went to Delhi to go to IIT Delhi. And I went there, I think I was, 18 maybe when I went to IIT. I was pretty arrogant. I think I considered myself to be one of the smartest people in the world and thought I knew everything. And I got to IIT and I realized, like, wow, there's so many smart people. And it was overwhelming being away from home. I didn't speak the language. I didn't speak Hindi at the time. In India, different states, there are different languages. And I almost went back home. I called my dad and said, I don't think I want to go to IIT. I want to come back home. I wasn't used to the food, and everything was so different. I didn't speak the language. And my dad said, that's not an option. You've chosen your path. Now it's up to you to make the journey interesting. And I really loved that quote. It still stays with me, because at every stage in our life, we choose a path, right? And I started Fable. This is the first time I'm actually like building a company from scratch. This is a path I've chosen. I've said no to so many great jobs to do this, and I have to make this exciting and successful and fun, not just for me, but for everyone who's part of the Fable journey. So yeah, I still use that advice. But one of the things, I think one of the hacks, if you will, or tricks that helped me do that is to belong to a community or identify a community of people that are there for you and support you. So at IIT, for example, this was when I was 18 or something, that community was other women who were at IIT, but also outside of IIT, studying engineering or sciences, even outside of IIT. And we would like get together and support each other and help each other, just be sounding boards and listen to each other. And so, yeah, I think that really helped me a lot. And so that's what I'm trying to build at Fable too, is communities that share interests that can come together and read together. So that's how I find. So how do I find those communities? It varies, I think, at different stages in your life and in your career. When I was a new mom, for example, my community was other new moms. And now it's a community of founders, women VCs. When I was at Cisco, it was people that are in large corporations. And that's natural and normal. It's really reaching out and taking the time. And it's not just taking, right? You have to give your time so that other people can share their time with you. So that's how I find my communities.
I love it. I love what you said about, you may not always choose the path, but it's up to you to make the journey interesting. And thank you for sharing like how important it is not just to take, but to give to those communities. So Indra, the question for you is, our club, when we were discussing it, discussed the unfortunate double standard that you experienced in the executive suite. And we quote, I had heard of and seen male CEOs yell, throw things, and use 4-letter words with great gusto, apparently a sign of their passion and commitment. But I was well aware that showing any of these emotions myself would set me back with the people around me. So the question is, from that quote, how can women and their allies combat these extremely problematic stereotypes for women leaders?
Here is the problem. I mean, this is fact of life. If I don't talk about it, I'm lying. It is a fact of life. You know what I noticed, Kelly, when us women get together, we have a different language that we speak to each other. We can use different words, we can have mannerisms, we can challenge each other in funny ways, sometimes in not so funny ways, in crude ways. And there's a level of comfort between us as women. Similarly, men have had these clubs forever. And part of that club is the 4-letter word, throwing things around and, throwing a tantrum because it's a power game. And all of a sudden, us women have come into the picture and we want them to change right away. They don't know how to change. They don't want to change because they're like looking at you going, why are you challenging status quo? Why are you changing status quo? Just go away. So what we have had to do, I speak for myself and I'm sure Padma too, because she's been in a more male-dominated environment than I have been. The tech world is incredibly male dominated. You've got to go in, you've got to make sure that they have their moments where they can still yell and scream and throw things around. But in front of me, don't do it. Because now you're drawing your talent base from a different pool that includes women. I'm not at the table because I'm a woman. I'm there because I'm talented. And the talent base you have to draw from includes a lot of women because women are wicked smart, they're hungry, they want freedom, economic freedom, and therefore they're going to come to work and really contribute to the job. You want them because you want to be successful. But if you want to keep them, you're going to have to modify your behavior. And the way you've got to think is saying, if your daughter or sister or your wife is working in a company and people around her talk the way you and the guys talk, would you like it? And if the answer is no, then clean up your act. So I think that we have to start sensitizing people to saying, hey, is this the way you'd want your children, your daughters to hear her colleagues talk? Really? Put yourself in that position. And so I think it's changing. The world is changing, thank God. But in the early days, it was temper tantrums and 4-letter words. There isn't a 4-letter word I don't know. Not that I use it because I couldn't. That was not the accepted norm, but I heard them all use it.
Yeah. And what a powerful statement to say, you are now drawing from a different talent pool. Yeah. And then the ability to ask them that question of, are your behaviors attractive to this potential talent pool? Because if they're not, they may go work for Padma, right?
That's right. Exactly right.
Exactly. And so Padma, I'd love for you to answer that question. I'd love to hear your take on how did you combat stereotypes?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many stereotypes, especially in tech, right? In addition to the language that is used, there's also stereotypes on how you should dress and what colors you wear or not wear, whether you wear a hoodie or not. If you wear a hoodie, you're a great software engineer. If you don't wear a hoodie, maybe you're not. And there's just all these ridiculous stereotypes that make no sense. And you're judged not only by your gender, you're judged by your size, you're judged by your hobbies, you're judged by what your appearance is. And this was something I had to overcome. Like I grew up in India, I love color and I love wearing bright colors. And in the beginning, I was actually told by somebody, hey, people are not going to take you seriously as an engineer unless you wear a gray or black hoodie. And for a while I tried that. And then I was like, this is nonsense. I don't like to dress this way. And so I think you would ultimately have to find the inner strength and the confidence, as you talk about, to be who you are and not to let people judge your capabilities by all these artificial things, right? I think we are at a stage now, I would say, my perspective has changed as well. Going what we went through last year with Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement. I think one thing now I talk about a lot is as leaders, we not only have to create environments for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just DEI anymore. It has to go beyond that. And you have to help people belong in the community that they're at work. What does that mean? It's not just including people to have a seat at the table. Right? Do they feel they can be all of themselves at that table? Diversity just means I am hiring people that are different. Equity means I'm treating everyone the same. Inclusion means, they get a seat at the table. That's not enough. We have to now say, you get the seat at the table, but you come with your whole self. I mean, Indra talks about how when she started working, she used to wear saris to work, and that was like, people looked at her like she was from another planet. And so in the tech industry, there's all these like other stereotypes that you have to, help people push those away and create an environment where people feel like they can belong. So yeah, I think this is something I call out if I face something, if someone's using language I don't like, or if someone I feel is even judging me because I'm small, I'm tiny, I'm short and skinny. And all these things.
And beautiful and cute.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
But these things are sort of like anti-power definition that people have in their mind, right? And so you sort of like have to tell people to suspend those things. And now I'm in a position of power. I make sure in my company, I am hiring people that are very different and they do feel like they can belong. And we talk about all kinds of stuff, not just work. And it's okay, right? Like, I love fashion. I like to paint. I play the guitar. I'm in a rock band, whatever it is, it's fine.
Yeah, but I want to add something to what Padmasree is saying, more as a valuable tip to all your listeners and watchers. You have to decide what your proposition is that you're offering the company. You can't be just an employee and try to sit around the table where the seat of power is. So you have to be very clear on what your proposition is. People have got to know what you're offering the company. And if it's unique and if it's really value add for the company, you're going to be respected. So think hard about what you're good at and constantly refine your skills so that you get better and better and better at it. Because in any company, as you move up, it's a real rat race. Everybody's fighting to nudge you out so they can move. Because remember, it's a pyramid. An organization is a pyramid, it thins out. So if you want to stay in place, that's up to you. But if you want to move up, you've got to fight that race. And to do that, you've got to have a proposition that's crystal clear first. Point number 2, you've got to invest in yourself. If you want to draw attention to your work rather than the way you dress or the amount of jewelry you wear or, whatever else you do, then you're mistaken. Because believe me, in my very early days at Booz Allen as a summer intern, I wore a sari. After that, I never wore a sari. I just wore a black or gray suit with a white blouse. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I want them to focus on what I'm going to offer them. Never focus on the way I dress. Never. Just focus on what I'm offering. You have to decide if you want to do that. Because whether you like it or not, you're dealing with people who are looking at each other, passing judgment without saying anything about how you dress. That's how it is. Finally, invest in communication skills. Invest in simplifying your message skills, not just communicating it. Take the most complex and simplify it.
Yeah.
So you may have a great proposition, but if you can't communicate it in a compelling way, people are not going to listen to you. So you've got to think hard about what is your value add? What's your proposition? How are you going to make others notice you as a professional, not as a woman, as a professional who happens to be a woman, not a woman who happens to be a professional. Just change the dialogue around. And if you did that, you'd be surprised how valuable you become in the company.
I love it. So that's everyone's homework. Okay. Your homework is what is your proposition? You can define that. How are you investing in yourself? And these can be free things or paid things. There's lots of things that are free out there on the interwebs these days. And how are you simplifying your message? I love it. It's beautiful advice. Yeah. So Indra, another question for you. Inside our Leading with Confidence Club, a lot of folks in there investing in themselves. Readers remarked on how you had to meet some really high expectations in your family and in your community. What things do you think have changed since you were growing up? And how many of these expectations for women still exist today?
I mean, they existed then, they still exist today. When in our family, education and grades was everything. All right. And those days, sometimes it felt punishing. In retrospect, thank God they focused me to do that, because otherwise I'd have gone off playing cricket or in a third-rate rock band, both of which would have been dead-end. Both of them would have been dead-end jobs, okay, or dead-end passions to pursue. So I think in a way, I'm glad they pushed me to focus on grades and education and move ahead. But then the rest of it was all internally driven, because once I came to the United States, I didn't want to let myself down. I didn't want to let my family down. I didn't want to let India down. And I didn't want to let the US down for giving me a chance. Coming here, studying in a prestigious university and getting a job in a wonderful consulting firm. I felt I had to live up to all of them, but that was an inner drive. And finally, once I got married, I didn't want to let my family down. So all of a sudden, my married family. So all of a sudden, I had this urge to do right by everybody else. Could I have stepped out of any of these at any point? Yeah, I could have. But I was not going to, because I felt like, as among the early people who ascended to the top of corporate America, I owed everybody that responsibility, because people are going to look at me and say, there's our role model, like we're talking today. So it was important that I did right by all these constituencies. So I worked hard, doing right by my company, my family, my ancestry, the country of my birth, the country that adopted me, everything. I worked hard at making sure I was an upright citizen. Did it take a lot from me? Yeah. But you know what? Nobody who plowed the ground for others had it easy. Nobody. So, that's part of being one of the early people.
Padma, I'd love for you to answer that question. Knowing the little I learned about your family and what you shared, it sounds like you had some pretty high expectations too. So
Yeah.
What would you offer?
Definitely. I think, my family was very supportive, but I think it's fairly common in India. I think even in these days to emphasize education. And I was always interested in science. And in the beginning, I wanted to be a physicist. And but I had very poor health when I was a child. I suffered from asthma and in fact, had to be homeschooled almost for a year and a half. I was so sick that I could not go to school. And I think in a way, my mom basically homeschooled me. Back then internet was not as prevalent as it is today. Lessons were actually sent and I had to sit down and absorb everything. And so I think the lesson I learned, and I think it's an important lesson, the tip I would give people is learning to simplify complexity, right? In fact, my previous boss, John Chambers, used to tell me that's my superpower. Especially in a technical area, if you're working in a tech company or in your technical field, there's just so much detail, right? Your brain has to deal with. But you then need to figure out how you explain your product or technology to somebody who's not technical or not in the technical field. I kind of learned that I actually attribute my physical illness as a kid to gaining that superpower, because I had to absorb all these lessons and figure out what are the main points I need to remember. So I think in that way, I feel like my situation, sometimes actually our disadvantages we can turn to our advantage. And I agree with Indra, you constantly have to work to improve and improve and improve till it becomes a superpower, right? And so for me, that is sort of something I consider to be my superpower. The other thing I think my family, especially my dad and my mom, emphasized to me was the ability to listen. I think and constantly learn. I think one thing that happens, when you're in a leadership position and you're growing, as Indra says, to the top of the pyramid, you have to be an A-type personality. You have to speak up. You have to push through doors to get to the top. You have to stay there. Everyone's trying to pull you down, and I think you need to stay there. So that requires a lot of resiliency. One of the things that happens is we stop listening to people as we become, grow in our careers. And I think that's something you have to constantly tell yourself. You can learn from anyone. You can learn from your peers. You can learn from people that work for you. And I used to say, and I still say this, when I was at CTO at Cisco, especially when you're at that role, people expect you to know the answers. And I think one of the best leadership traits I feel is asking the right questions, not necessarily knowing all the answers. So I think my two tips would be make sure you're always asking the right questions and learning. It is now called growth mindset, or being curious, asking and seeking out information. I think those two things I feel I learned from my family: ability to simplify a lot of complexity and think about what are the 1 or 2, 3 things that are important. that you want to communicate, whether it's about yourself or about the organization you're leading. And secondly, just like learning to be a good listener and asking the right questions versus like jumping to give the answers all the time. And by the way, that was a hard thing for me to learn, because I was one of those people that would finish other people's sentences constantly. And it's something my mom used to say, like, listen, don't talk all the time. And it was like something I still had to like learn when I was a kid.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. I'm sure many folks in the chat can relate to that. Y'all are talking about learning. And so I want to just dig into this a little bit deeper. Indra, you just said, invest in yourself, and you believe that great leaders are lifelong students. And so I know you worked with Fable, Padma's company, to curate some of your book recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
The question is how has reading shaped your life as a leader?
I think it's not a question of reading, it's a question of the quest for knowledge, having insatiable curiosity.
Mhm.
Because when we're kids, we keep asking, why is the sky so high? Why is it blue? Why is the car going so fast? We ask hundreds of questions. In fact, there are books in the marketplace which says how to answer the 100 questions your kid asks you. Okay. What happens when we get older? We stop asking those questions. I think if somebody presents something to you, just ask yourself, did I really understand it? Or am I just nodding my head and saying I understood it? Then go back. Now we have Google, we have all of these search engines. Figure out what it actually means, dig deep, and keep pursuing that subject until you understand it down to its, building blocks. Then reconstruct what the story is. And that way you really understand the subject matter. Critically important, because if you don't, you're sort of waving your hands and talking as if you know something. In reality, you don't know, and everybody else knows you don't know. Okay. Sometimes, I was in a very important call yesterday, and they presented some technology, and we had to judge who should get the prize. I was very honest, and I said, you know what? These 3 projects in this category are above my pay grade. I said, I don't understand the technology, and I don't want to comment on it because I don't understand it. But if you gave me another week, I can go off and study it. And they were surprised that I would say something like that, because I spent a week on this and I didn't understand it enough to offer a point of view. So they delayed the decision and said, we'll come back in a week. So I think it's important that we think of this insatiable curiosity as a critical building block to, creativity, to furthering your proposition for all of these reasons. And I want to go back a little bit, because there are so many people of Indian origin on the podcast or the event today. This part of your face and your body is critically important in Zoom times and when you're in meetings. There are 3 things people notice, you don't realize they do. They notice your hair, whether it's billowing all around you and drawing more attention away from, your message. Second is your teeth, critically important. And the third, how you present yourself in your face. And people don't realize it. And I didn't get any coaching on this. I have to tell you, some people come with a lot of waves of hair which just get in the way. Some people have food sticking on the teeth. They don't whiten their teeth. People notice these things. I'm not saying they're that important, but take away all the things people will notice as negatives and make them focus on the positives, which is the message you're trying to convey. And it's better to have 2 or 3 decent outfits than having 15 lousy outfits. So go for quality, not quantity. It's okay to wear them again and again. I grew up wearing 2 suits, wearing them interchangeably for 4 or 5 years. It didn't do me any harm, because I just focused on 2 things: the message and how to present a professional image. And make sure your clothes don't smell of the dinner you ate yesterday. I'm telling you, this is a genuine concern, especially for cultures where the food has a wonderful aroma and spicing. When you shut all the windows, especially during a hot summer or winter, your food takes on the smell. People notice it. So all of these things are small things you can get rid of, irritants, and get them to focus on your proposition, because you are in a fight to move ahead. If you can't address the things that you can address, you shouldn't be complaining about the things that you can't address.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Indra, you do a beautiful job. If anybody here is wondering, how do you break something down to get really curious and figure it out? Several times in her book, you talk about getting assigned to a new division, a new department. And in your book in detail, you describe how you broke it all down and learned all the things. So if anybody's curious, how do you do that? I highly encourage you to read Indra's book, because several times she will show you how to do it. So Padma, I kind of want to ask you a similar question. We're talking about learning and investing in yourself. You launched a LinkedIn newsletter called Lifelong Learning. Why is this theme so important to you? And what role has reading played in your own personal and professional life?
Yeah. I mean, for me, reading has played a big role. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was sick. I had to stay home for a long time. I couldn't be, outside playing because of my illness. So my entertainment to entertain myself was books. And I actually learned about so many different countries, even the United States. I think one of the main reasons I wanted to come to the US was I was reading all these books and I was like, wow, I want to go to this place. Books have this power of taking you into a magical new place, right? They make you laugh, they make you cry, they make you think. So they have always played a big role in who I have become as a person, both fiction and nonfiction. I think you learn a lot when other people write things down. And why did I start a newsletter? And it's, to me, I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. And learning, by the way, comes in many different forms, right? You learn when you talk to each other. It's like what we are trying to do with your club, Kelly, is I learn a lot when somebody reads something and interprets it very differently than I have interpreted it. And someone says like, oh, this thing evoked this memory in me. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I never even saw it that way. So I think there is a lot to be said for peer-to-peer learning. And I've learned a lot in my career by observing my peers. People always ask me, did you have a mentor? And is it important to have a mentor? Actually, this is something I wrote about in my newsletter. To me, coaching is more important than having a mentor. And sometimes we all think mentor is someone who is at a higher level than we are in the organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. A mentor actually could be a peer of yours. And, perhaps in my case, that was true. I am terrible as a salesperson per se. I'm an engineer, I'm a technologist. I learned a lot from my peers at Cisco who were amazing salespeople. I would go to customer meetings with them. I would watch them. John Chambers, my previous boss, was one of them. I would be fascinated, like watching John talk to customers and sort of put himself in their brain. So that's something I observed and learned from my peers, and I think improved myself. The lifelong learning theme, and the reason I say there are two types of skills you have to learn. There are domain-specific skills you have to learn, and these days it's almost table stake, right? Meaning, if you're an engineer, you have to learn technical skills. If you're a software engineer, what language do you program in? If you are a business leader, you have to really understand business models, markets, pricing. If you're in sales, you have to figure out how to explain the value proposition. These are all domain-specific skills. There are other skills that I call universal skills. It doesn't matter which job you're in, which function you're in, you will need to be successful. And these skills are what I call universal skills that are transferable, right? Leading with confidence is one of those skills. Leading with empathy is another one of these skills. It doesn't matter whether you're an individual contributor or a manager in a technical field, in a business field, whatever it is, if you have confidence, you'll be successful. So this is like two different types of skills, and we have to invest in both of those. My thesis is the domain skills are best served through instruction, meaning you take a class to program in Ruby and Rails. If someone's teaching you how to do it, that's instructional. Traditionally, all learning throughout its history has been instructional, right? Classroom, there's someone who's a master who's teaching you, and you sit, you passively take notes, and you go back and try to figure out whether you've learned that. That works well in domain-specific skills, not necessarily in what I call these universal skills. And you need both to be successful as a leader. So for me, things like leading with confidence, leading with empathy, leading with radical candor, all these things are universal skills that are best served through peer-to-peer learning. And so that's, I feel like lifelong learning is both these are important. And if you're especially in the tech industry, so many things are changing. As Indra said, like I mean, if you ask people what is Web 3.0, you'll get, I don't know, 100 different definitions. Everyone has it. I don't think anyone knows. And so you have to continue to learn and read, and that's how you get better. So yeah, my advice to people is focus on both. You need to, sometimes we over-rotate on domain skills and not necessarily on universal skills. But actually, ultimately, why you might fail in your career is because you don't have these universal skills, right?
Great point.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're exactly right. And I think we see that more and more. And that's what I love about what Fable is doing, is bringing the attention to this lifelong learning of the other skills. And reskilling is a term that you use. So Indra, our club members have a question about the description of your busy life in the late 90s. And here's, were you busy? And so here's a quote from your book. I worked and worked and worked. I'd go home at night, take a shower, put on my flannel nightgown to show the girls I wasn't leaving, put them to bed, and sit up reading mail and reviewing documents until 1 or 2 a.m. I was almost never around for dinner. So what's your advice for women in the audience today who are living their own hectic schedules in our hybrid workplaces? And what did you learn during this intense time in your life?
Look, at the end of the day, we all have to make choices. Do you want to remain single and just go for a career and rise to the top? Do you want to get married, which means you have to now also focus on another person? Do you want to have children, which means you're now focusing on a lot of people. Even one child is a lot of work. Do you want to have your own passion? Do you want to go and do things extracurricular or extra outside the workplace? That also takes time. So I think you've got to really sit down and ask yourself, what do you want to do? Do what makes sense for you. You know, we're all here in this world for a finite time. Decide what you want to do. I came to this country with nothing in my hand. I came out of my own choice, went to school, had no money. We had to make money from scratch. My husband came the same way, came to go to school. We both met. So we started from the bottom and worked our way up little by little by little. And we loved what we were doing. We loved spending time with each other. We loved having kids, everything we loved. And we realized that those were all choices we made. And so we had to make these choices work. The good news is I married the right guy. I'm married into the right family because his family said, we're going to support you while you're having children. My mother said this, my in-law said that because my father had passed away. So the family helped. And I'll say this to anybody. If you really want to rise in the corporate world, or even your own business, if you want to keep it growing, it's a lot of work. If you think it's a 9 to 5 and then you can just park it on the side and go do your thing, forget it. It consumes you all the time. As I said, the pyramid narrows as you go to the top. It gets tougher and tougher because not only are you fighting off everybody else, you've got to prove to be better than everybody else. The world around you is changing. So you also have to be a lifelong learner to be really refining and improving your proposition. So you're back to school every day. You're taking homework every day to improve your proposition. So it's work. And unless you have support at home, that's fantastic. Unless you have a supportive spouse, you can't do it. So you've got to really calibrate what you want to be, what kind of support structure you want, and what kind of a whole family structure you want to build in terms of spouse, yes or no, spouse and children, yes or no. Some people add a dog. Having a dog is also a child. Just know all of that is work. Don't take that all and say, but it's the company's responsibility to take care of me. The company can't take care of you for everything. You can't haul every problem you have to the company. We are a company. We can do some, but not everything. So we want you to join us. If you're an awesome talent, we love you. We'll do the most we can, but you've got to co-opt your own ecosystem to help you too.
It's beautiful. And you write a lot about how you have that support system. And I think, for, folks on this call who are curious about how do I cultivate a support system, one of the things you'll read in Indra's book is you had supportive leaders, you had a supportive partner, you had a supportive family. And I love that you don't overlook that. It's beautifully said.
I mean, I'm a product of mentoring. I'm a product of my family. And, in the book, we talk about this trade-off between power and humility. Very important. You've got to keep your humility, intellectual humility, actual humility. You've got to keep it going, because the day humility takes a backseat to power, it's over.
Write that down.
I'm sorry, the day
really
power takes a front seat,
Yes.
it's over.
I actually learned that from Indra. She came to speak at an event in when I was still, I think I was VP at Motorola, and she talked about how, I think your mom said, I think it's in your book too, said, well, do you leave your crown, the day you walk in, you leave your crown in your garage. That's something that still stays with me. It's very true. Like, I think very true with my son too, right? Like when he was growing up, he's older now, but when he was a little kid, when I got home, I was mommy, and
exactly right. So there's a trade-off between power and humility. Don't let power get the better of you at home. Keep it at work.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, a question for you, Padma, and then we'll move into rapid fire ones from Indra from my audience. So Padma, in your newsletter, you recently wrote how tech companies can take steps to make it through our current economic downturn. And one, we don't know, right? It depends on what economist you're listening to, and keep themselves recession-proof in the future. What's your advice for leaders and the next generation of leaders as they face these coming challenges?
I mean, I think the one thing that's really important is to be honest with the team, right? Like, I think people are worried, am I going to get laid off, or is the company going to not hire? I mean, every single company I know and read off has stopped hiring or paused hiring anyway, including companies that have never done this, tech companies. And so, yeah, it is a worrying time, and no one knows all the answers. This is like the big R word, is it happening or not happening? I think it is important as a leader to be honest with the team and really be clear on priorities and get them very focused on, this is what we need to get done for the next 3 months, 6 months. And as a startup, it's really hard, right? As a big company, you can juggle many things. As a startup, we have to be super focused. So that's one thing that we constantly do, constantly reevaluate our priorities. What do we need to work on, our roadmap? I think those two are super important. The other thing I would do is, it's a good time to actually turn people over. If you are a manager or a leader inside a company, ask yourself, is everyone in that? And it sounds a little harsh, but it's, I think, really, you're actually doing people a favor. If they're struggling to be successful in your environment, it's best right now to, with empathy and compassion, because otherwise what happens is brings the morale of the whole team down. And it's good to say, okay, we need to cut headcount, and so this is who we are going to let go and focus and reward the people that are performing really well. I think the mistake I see leaders do during times of recessions, no one gets a raise. I think that's actually the biggest mistake, because that actually demoralizes people who are working so hard, and you actually end up losing those people, right? Your top talent. For people, individuals, I actually feel it's the best time now to invest in these universal skills that are transferable. And if you're going to think about making a career change, job change, company change, do it now, because companies are still, I think, hungry to get the top talent. It's a mistake, by the way, I've made in my own career. Sometimes we're very comfortable and doing well. We stick with that job versus, like, I wish I had started a company sooner in my career. But I was like, I was doing really well. I was very successful in big companies. Like, building companies is really hard. Startups are a lot of work, but they're a lot of fun. So I think, in recession, it's important to be super focused. Ask yourself, if you're an individual, are you getting the most out of this job? Are you learning? Back to what Indra said. I always say, like, if you feel like you could do the job in your sleep, it's time to move on. Something's not right. At that point, you need to be a little uncomfortable in any job, because otherwise you're not learning constantly.
I love that. And I want to plaster that everywhere, because in my own practice, so many, especially women, come to me thinking that if they're feeling uncomfortable, it means they're doing something wrong. Right. But I love how you say this, and I want everybody to hear this again. If you're a little uncomfortable, it means you're stretching your comfort zone. It means it's okay to feel a little doubt. I mean, my hunch is that both of you have probably felt a little discomfort in your careers.
I left Cisco to go build cars. I was like, I've never built a car. And,
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it was very uncomfortable, but quickly figured out, okay, a lot of the tech in the car I know, and it's sort of like it's actually fun learning how to build a car. So you learn so much in that way, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
I love it. So Indra, we have a few rapid fire questions from some folks who in the club who have read your book, and they have some very deep questions. And the first one is,
Okay.
who are the 8 members of the Don't Look Back study group at Yale, and where are they now? If you
Oh,
can
we
tell
get
us who-
together. We get together. So it's not
Oh.
a mystery. When we have our Yale reunions, we get together. Holly Hayes, Greg Platts, Tom Gage, Ram Pucha, all 8 of us get together. Laurie Levitt. We're all very good friends. And we actually like each other still.
Oh.
It was interesting. It was a wonderful class at Yale in 1980, the class of 80, because we were 110 students. And for our last reunion, there were 70 of us who returned for the reunion. 70 out of 110. That's a 70%.
Yeah, it's a very big number.
It's a fantastic return rate for many, many years after graduation. So tight class.
Absolutely. Beautiful example of a micro community that you talk about, Padma, as well, as to cultivate that. And this is a great question. And, I'm not sure if this individual got the number, maybe the numbers in your book, but the quote is the average CEO at a large company lasts 5 years and you last 12. Why do you think that is? And how did you avoid burnout?
The burnout came around year 10. I could feel the tiredness, but I will tell you, the way I look at my tenure, I did 2 6-year terms, because in the first 6-year term, I had to navigate through the financial crisis. I had to transform the company. The second 6-year term, I had to extract performance from the transformation and somehow suck it up during the financial crisis and somehow manage through it. So I did 2 6-year terms. And, I truly loved my job. I loved PepsiCo. I loved the people. I had a supportive board. And yes, there were days that I was exhausted. I couldn't stand the external criticism, who all thought I should change, but didn't want me to invest to change. Somehow they thought if I told a prayer, it would just drop from the skies above. Sometimes I sit back and say, is it all worth it? The answer is yes. If you want to leave a legacy behind of a great company, great performance, and a great platform against which the new CEO can grow, and a great stable of leaders, you leave fulfilled. That's when I stepped down from PepsiCo in 2018 as CEO, and 2019 as chairman. I had no regrets. And the day I left the office to come to my new office, I didn't even remember that I'd run PepsiCo for 12 years and been in the company for 25, because I left very fulfilled. I think that's the way we should all retire from jobs, not try to sit here throwing darts at the existing CEO.
Yeah. Wow. Wonderful.
So graceful. Wonderful.
Last question from the club. Indra, you mentioned you were a popular voice on work-life balance. What does work-life balance mean to you now? And how do you think C-suite executives, especially women in the C-suite with young families, can best maintain it in 2022 and beyond?
See, if I had had smartphones and Zoom and all that when I was becoming CEO and my kids were smaller, I'd have had it easier, because I would not have traveled as much. And every time the school called and said, your daughter sprained her ankle, I wouldn't rush to the school. I would put the FaceTime on and say, show me the ankle. Just fine, keep going, okay? No, I didn't take a chance, because you have extra guilt being a working mom.
Yeah.
So I would zip out of any meeting and say, sorry guys, my daughter's hurt, I'm going. So I was this involved, attentive, just a loving parent. My kids forget those things later on in life, but that's the kind of mom I was. And so I actually think I'd have had an easier life, because I wouldn't have traveled so much. Here I traveled a lot. Yeah. I loved it, don't get me wrong, but I would have used the technology a lot more. So I think where work-life balance was a challenge in my time, and there were always trade-offs we were making, in today's world, somehow you can make the balance work. I was juggling. Today you can actually balance it somewhat. And remember, one of the things I say to all of you, once you reach the CEO -2 levels, all bets are off. It's a different world. That's a rarefied environment where don't talk about balance. There is no balance. It's a different work-life equation, just different workload, and it's very challenging.
Mhm.
And people who don't tell you that are lying.
Very well said. I'd love to ask a closing question of both of you, and Padma, I'll start with you. If you could have it your way, what transformation would you like to see in the workplace in your lifetime as it relates to women?
I think, as I mentioned, this concept of belonging. I would love to see workplaces embrace people being who they are, right? And there is no strict definition of you have to be this or that, right? I think in the world we live in, using the right pronouns, understanding what people want to be, how they want to be addressed. It sounds like a very simple thing, but it's very profound for people and their identity. Starting there, letting people be their true self. I think if we create that level of be who you are, it's okay to talk about kids and my kid sprained their ankle and I need to leave and not feel guilty about it. As Indra was saying, I went through the same thing in my career. I even myself, if I had that, I think I feel I could have been perhaps even better at performing, and the company would have gotten more out of me, right? Instead of having to call in sick because your child is sick. So I think there is this, for me, that would be a dream where, everyone would feel like I can go to work and be my complete self and not be judged for things that don't pertain to my skill set, my competency, my value proposition, as Indra puts it. It's just letting people be human. I think that's one thing. The second thing is this notion of definition of power. I would love to see that changed. I think there are so many, and I think it is beginning to, there's so many things we used to call soft skills. Now we are realizing, especially last 2 years, oh my gosh, people actually want leaders with those skills. People want to work for an empathetic leader. They want to understand that working from home when I have a newborn baby is really hard. And I want an empathetic leader, whereas before it used to be like a soft skill. So I would love more soft skills to be considered power skills going forward.
I love it. Indra, how would you answer that question? If you had it your way, what transformation would you like to see in the workplace for women in your lifetime?
I'm looking at women as a potent talent pool. 70% of high school valedictorians are women in the US. Women are getting 10 points more college degrees than men. They're now getting more professional degrees. So women are a potent talent pool. I'd like to see a situation soon where we look at talent overall, not female talent, male talent, trying to fill every box. If we look at the whole talent and say, we are gender blind, background blind, ethnicity blind, we're going to hire the best people, I think we'll end up with a very diverse workplace. I think we go into so many biases. We end up hiring people who look like us, thinking we can make decisions fast. What we don't realize is the fast decision may not be the best decision. I think diversity of thinking and people around the table makes a difference. So I'd love to see an environment where people focus on raw talent, not on talent married with background, so that you can give the diverse people negative points and give everybody else positive points. I'd love to see that environment.
Yeah, awesome.
What did I not ask either one of you that you feel like you would love to share with our audience today? We have about 2 minutes left before we make some closing comments. I'll let you
what you didn't ask me is how great Padma is.
Oh, she is.
A few tech people, she really is. I mean, people have really got to understand she's our next generation CEO. She's already a CEO, but running big companies that can make a huge difference. Lovely, lovely person. It's a privilege to see you again, Padma.
Yeah, and I hope y'all can drop the link to Padma's newsletter because she articulates all of those things. Okay, Padma, what would you like to say that I didn't ask?
I mean, I think for me, the one thing I would love, maybe this is a topic for another time, is helping people get through what we just got through. Like the pandemic fundamentally changed many people reevaluated their priorities, or the definition of work is changed, right? And so in some ways, how will we rewrite future? How will we rewrite what leadership is, what work even is? It's a big topic, and I think that's something we could maybe have another panel, and love to actually have Indra come join that.
No, I think the point I would add to what Padma said is, I would tell everybody, be very careful of thinking that your workplace has to address all of your problems.
Right.
You cannot haul every one of your problems to the workplace. Think about what it is the workplace can address and what you have to address on your own. Make sure you understand the boundaries.
Yeah.
100%. I often tell my clients, don't allow your work. While it's important, it is part of our identity. We often introduce ourselves by saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what I do. And don't let it be all of your identity. One of the things I want to come back to is you both have all of these amazing extracurricular things. You're both in a rock band. I'm not dropping that. Like,
please don't.
There's music, there's reading, there's art, there's all of these things. And so I just love what you say, that there can just be so much more than placing all of the responsibility on your boss or your work for all of your happiness and fulfillment.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Kelly, for a great conversation.
I know
awesome.
Kelly, amazing moderator and host. And Kelly, by the way, has a great club on Fable where she actually coaches people to lead with confidence. And they just read Indra's book and they'll read it again. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't checked it out,
awesome.
Join.
Yes.
Well done. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you both. It's been a delight of my month, my year to talk with both of you. So thank you. And everybody in the chat is going crazy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about Indra, her website is indranooyi.com. And if you want to join Fable's Leading with Confidence Club that Padma just talked about, we do read 3 books together. We read Indra's book, of course. We read my book, which is Closing the Confidence Gap. And we read Reality-Based Leadership by Cy Wakeman. And we also do some group leadership coaching calls in there as well. So Indra, Padma, thank you again so much for joining us. I know that everybody—
Thank you, guys. Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.